Welcome to Aerotech.
In February 2025, the United States imposed tariffs on over $60 billion worth of Chinese goods, aiming to pressure China into changing its trade practices. The expectation was that this would lead to China backing down and making concessions. However, what followed was not a simple economic confrontation. Instead, China devised a sophisticated and long-term strategy. The tariffs were only the surface. Behind the scenes, China began to reshape global economic dynamics by targeting not only American goods, but also the very foundation of the U.S.'s economic influence on the world stage. While the U.S. focused on economic pressure, China responded with a series of calculated moves designed to shift the balance of global power. China's initial response to the tariffs was swift. They imposed their own tariffs on $35 billion worth of American goods, focusing on sectors critical to U.S. political interests like agriculture, energy, and automobiles. Soybeans from the Midwest, oil from Texas, and other commodities became focal points of China's retaliation. The goal was not only to cause economic damage, but also to create internal pressure within the U.S. itself, with businesses in these industries likely to lobby against the trade war. By targeting these sectors, China was playing a strategic game, understanding that economic pain could translate into political friction within the U.S. One of China's strongest economic tools is its control over rare earth minerals, critical for the production of technology, including smartphones, electric vehicles, and even military equipment. China controls over 80% of the world's supply of these materials, and when the U.S. imposed new tariffs, China hinted at limiting the export of rare earth minerals. This was a calculated move to put pressure on industries in the U.S. that are dependent on these materials. By controlling the supply of vital resources, China could slow down the technological advancements of the U.S., creating leverage over industries and security concerns alike. While the U.S. was preoccupied with imposing tariffs, China was quietly advancing a strategy to reduce its reliance on American goods. They forged new trade deals with countries like Brazil, Russia, and Mexico. These deals were designed not only to secure alternative supply chains, but also to weaken America's economic leverage. As the U.S. continued to press China, Beijing was laying the groundwork for a new economic network that bypassed American influence. This strategy wasn't about retaliation in the short term, but about long-term economic independence and shifting global alliances in China's favor. Beyond rare earth minerals, China's economic strategy also targeted the U.S. energy sector. China had been one of the largest buyers of American oil and liquefied natural gas, LNG. With the tariffs in place, U.S. energy companies saw contracts with China evaporate, leading to delays in shipments and a loss of profits. Meanwhile, China shifted its focus to building stronger energy ties with Russia and the Middle East, securing its own energy future. This shift not only diminished U.S. influence in the energy market, but also posed a long-term risk, as these new energy deals may outlast the trade conflict itself. The U.S. sought to limit China's access to advanced technology by imposing restrictions on selling computer chips and blocking Chinese tech companies like Huawei from operating in the U.S. market. In response, China invested heavily in developing its own technology. The government funneled money into research and development, focusing on producing its own computer chips, advancing AI, and creating faster 5G networks. Far from being hindered by these actions, China rapidly caught up with the U.S., and now Chinese tech companies are competing directly with their American counterparts, potentially even outperforming them in some areas. This isn't just a trade war, it's a technological race to lead the global economy. China holds over $800 billion in U.S. government debt, and while selling all of it would be detrimental to both economies, even small adjustments can have massive ripple effects. After the new tariffs, China quietly started reducing its purchase of U.S. debt. This small move caused an increase in borrowing costs for the U.S., making it more expensive to fund things like public projects, home loans, and credit cards. It's a quiet but highly effective form of economic pressure, affecting not only the U.S. government but also everyday Americans. As the U.S. focused on tariffs, China worked behind the scenes to build stronger relationships with countries around the world. China signed new trade agreements with the European Union, Southeast Asia, Russia, and Latin America. The goal was clear: reduce reliance on the US and expand China's influence in key markets. This wasn't just about sidestepping tariffs. It was a broader effort to build a new economic network where China held more power, and the US found itself competing with rising global competitors. The US trade conflict with China had ripple effects even closer to home in North America. Both Canada and Mexico, longtime US allies, were also hit with tariffs, which led them to respond with their own tariffs targeting American goods. This created a situation where both countries sought to strengthen trade relationships with China. As a result, the US risked losing its influence in its own neighborhood. With Canada and Mexico looking to China for new trade opportunities, the balance of power in North America began to shift. The US-China trade war isn't just affecting the two countries involved. Its impact is global. Countries around the world are feeling the effects of disrupted supply chains, rising product prices, and uncertainty in markets. Southeast Asian countries, European companies, and even developing nations that supply raw materials to China are all affected by the ripples of this conflict. The global economy is slowing, costs are rising, and businesses face greater risks. For ordinary people, this means higher prices at the checkout, whether for food, clothing, or electronics. The long-term consequences of this trade war are still unfolding, but one thing is clear: its impact will be felt worldwide.